Hey guys, it's me again. Yesterday I read Threefold Section 1, Part 5. We finished with Section 1, and today we're going to start Section 2. Section 2 is called Redeemer, and this will be Part 1. When he gazed into the water, leaning against the bridge, Junio saw the past he had left behind 5 years ago. He saw himself, the consequences he had escaped, and the family he had deserted. One person's reflection stared back at him from the water. Junio had moved on after he left, but he had left behind unfinished business. Coming back meant finishing it and fixing a mistake that had held consequences for everyone. The mistake was allowing Shinjiro to become the warden. Leaving him in his position had resulted in the death of Kotaro and Akura's capture. Takashi had suffered as well, even worse than Junio could have imagined, and he didn't want to think about how many people had been hurt in his absence. He knew he should have taken care of Shinjiro at the time, but at the time, he had allowed his emotions to get the better of him. After freeing his sister from prison, Junio found himself with Hugo. They headed back toward the prison together, so he could put an end to Shinjiro. He led the way, thinking about the man Akura had sent with him. He knew nothing about Hugo except he had been a prisoner like his sister, falsely accused of a crime he did not commit. Junio did not trust him, but he did trust his sister. Hugo had managed to earn a bit of his respect. Junio realized Hugo had fought for his sister and shown himself a capable geoenergist. The reason I was in prison was because my older brother framed me, Hugo said. Junio listened as Hugo broke the silence between them to explain himself. I ran into him after I chased him down. I've never committed a crime in my life. A man named Leiko was murdered. He's the main culprit, but he told me he didn't do it. He told me he had to keep me safe from the person who did. Next thing I know, I woke up in prison. I ran into your sister while trying to escape and find out who murdered Leiko. Junio wondered why Hugo felt the need to explain himself. They're working together, Hugo said and stopped. Junio turned to face him. He told me to save her, and she asked me to come with you. I get the impression you don't trust me, and that's fine, but I chose to help, even though I know it's what they want. Junio said nothing. He suspected there was more to this than Akura told him. I know this situation is personal, and you can handle it yourself, but I also know we're going to have to work together, Hugo said. I think Akura and my brother Jackson are counting on it. Junio said nothing, and Hugo did not seem to be waiting for a response. Hugo spoke as if his words were facts he thought Junio should know. Junio nodded before he continued toward the prison. He had wondered why Akura needed him to take Hugo with him. Listening to Hugo, he realized she wanted him to remain with Hugo even after he met with Shinjiro. Why she wanted that drew Junio's curiosity. They walked in silence until they reached the hidden tunnel. Before Junio could lift the wall, guards ambushed them. He and Hugo found themselves surrounded. Junio should have known they would be waiting. Takashi would have remembered the tunnel, considering he was the reason it existed. He clenched his right hand into a fist to bring lightning down from the sky. Instead of hitting his targets, the group of guards, he watched the lightning hit earthen mounds. He turned to Hugo, who he knew formed them. Hugo used his geoenergy to raise the wall. Hugo had some experience with or knowledge of electro-energists, Junio noticed. Seeing his hand motion must have signaled to him he was going to strike, and Hugo had countered accordingly. You lead the way to the warden, Hugo said. I'll take care of everyone else. Junio heard the concern in Hugo's voice, concern for the guard's safety. When Hugo raised the wall, more guards awaited them. Junio watched him run ahead of him. The guards fired shots of Faison. Hugo dropped to the ground to avoid them. Before Junio could unleash lightning to clear the tunnel, Hugo used the tunnel to his advantage. Using earth, he bound all the guards to the walls and ceiling. Junio saw that Hugo wanted to avoid fighting. Hugo employed these tactics because he cared about the guards' well-being. That much was clear to Junio. What was unclear to him, if Hugo also employed these tactics because he didn't think he could fight them and win. Junio walked forward, past Hugo, and sparked lightning across his hand to illuminate the tunnel. When they reached the second wall, Hugo raised it and followed Junio under it. Junio had planned to take them through the tunnel pathways, through the hidden pathways to reach Shinjiro, but Takashi knew them, so he would have them all covered. That was not a problem. Instead, he would take the direct route, so Shinjiro would know and see he was on his way. That's the end of part 1, but since it was so short, I'm going to go ahead and read part 2 as well, or at least a part of it. Junio watched Hugo close and block off the hidden tunnel. He took his firearm in hand and climbed the stairs. Once he reached the top, he saw guards waiting. Hugo, who was right behind him, dropped each guard through the floor. With the guards handled, they proceeded for the lifts at the end of the corridor. Junio examined the lift, and Takashi had cut power to it. He pulled the doors open. He started the lift and closed the doors with a jolt of lightning a moment later. Afterward, he leaned against the back wall and watched as the lift traveled upward past each floor. We're going to ride up to the top? Hugo questioned. I didn't think it would be that simple, but I think it's the best way. The faster we reach them, the less energy we have to waste on the guards. Them? Junio questioned, watching the lift go from the 6th floor to the 7th floor and continue its climb. His only target was Shinjiro. Shinjiro and Takashi, Hugo said, sounding surprised to hear him respond. Junio had been blocking Takashi from his mind. He wanted to avoid facing him again. He refused to consider the possibility, but he, ignoring the truth, would not prevent it from not being true. Takashi would be waiting with Shinjiro. When we reach them, Hugo said, I'll handle Takashi. Junio shifted his attention from watching the lift ascend past each floor to Hugo. You will not be able to dispatch him. Fighting Takashi himself was not an option. He barely had the willpower to blast him earlier. The second time he met him, he could not bring himself to use his abilities against him. Takashi had such an impact on his life. He could not cause him to suffer by his hands. Hugo's tactics might work on the inexperienced guards with Faison weaponry, but Takashi would easily defeat him. If he fought Takashi and Shinjiro together, they would test all his skills and abilities. Here lay his dilemma. Takashi would stay his hand. I might not be able to take him down in one shot like you did earlier, Hugo said, but I'll handle him. I'm devising a plan. Junio was about to respond. He disliked people who failed to listen to reason, but Hugo did not allow him to speak. Look, Hugo said, I think I know what you're thinking. I know Takashi can destroy me, but I'm not going to let you take them both. I'm not being cocky or overconfident. I'm going to use my head and try to prevent major injuries to both parties. He's like family to you, so between our two options, this is the better one. Hugo knew he wanted to avoid facing him. That's why Hugo wanted to do this, even though he knew Takashi was a stronger and dangerous opponent. Hugo didn't sound like or think like most people he had met in his life. If things get out of hand, Junio said as the lift stopped to the top floor, I'm going to fight until we get this thing done, Hugo said. Hugo finished his sentence, but not Junio's thought. Before Junio opened the doors, Takashi spoke over an intercom. "Junior," Takashi said, "you've grown into a powerful and skilled young man. I knew you'd come back to Casadea one day, but I never thought you'd return a criminal, helping prisoners escape. Meeting under these circumstances is a shame." As he listened to Takashi, he pondered over several questions his coming back had raised. What had happened to Takashi? What had him working with Shinjiro and disregarding his shared path with Akira and him? Did Takashi hate him for what he had done? Did he blame him now? Or did he lose himself after those traumatic events? "I see you've decided to turn yourself in and return one of the prisoners," Takashi said. "Once we've taken Akira back into custody, I might be able to talk the warden into granting you leniency." Junyo pressed the intercom button and held it to speak with Takashi. "I am not here to turn myself in or return one of the prisoners. I am here to speak with Shinjiro and fix a mistake I made years ago, allowing him to stay in control." Junyo let the intercom button go. "I know why you're here, Junyo," Takashi said. "You wouldn't have made it this far if I didn't. I just hoped this situation wouldn't come down to a fight between us. I'll have to put you down before I put you away." "He wasn't always like this," Hugo said, as if he had known Takashi in the past. He never should have listened to Akira and brought Hugo into this personal matter. "What changed him?" Hugo asked before he opened the doors. Hugo's question stopped him. Even though Hugo met Takashi only an hour or so earlier, he was right. Takashi had not always been like this. "He lost a son," Junyo said in a whisper. He wanted to answer Hugo's question for himself. He had not planned on answering him, but the words came. Hugo somehow knew something was wrong with Takashi, even though he did not know him. When tragedy breaks a good person, some people can see it, feel it, or sense it. Could Hugo be an empath? No. Perhaps he was just one of those people. He decided he had to correct his answer to properly answer Hugo's question for himself. No. He lost two. Hugo said nothing in response. Junyo opened the doors to a corridor filled with guards and blocked off by a metal gate. "Hugo, these guards are your problem." Junyo knew Takashi had sealed the corridor and filled it with guards. He and Hugo would have to get to the other side of the prison, across this corridor and a bridge to reach Shinjiro's office. Hugo had backed against the lift's side wall to avoid the incoming Phison bullets. Hearing Junyo's words, Hugo pulled stones from the walls and ceilings to construct a moving barrier in front of the lift. To prevent Hugo from dropping them below, these guards kept on the move while firing. Junyo stepped from the lift, but Hugo's initial barrier quickly protected him. Hugo constructed two more he could move on their sides. When Hugo left the lift, he constructed one more at their back. The guards kept blasting holes in his initial barrier, but Junyo kept moving forward. Hugo did not bother to cover them. He simply rotated the barriers until, as Junyo, he simply continued rotating the barriers as Junyo continued onward. "Drop the front one," Junyo said. When Hugo did not comply, he turned to face him for the first time in a while. "The gate." The realization of what he wanted to do hit Hugo a second later. He read it on his face. Hugo split the front barrier in two and pulled it apart. Junyo aimed his firearm at the metal gate and destroyed it with a thunder bullet. More guards were behind the gate as he expected, which made him wonder when Hugo would realize he would have to change his approach. Hugo wanted to take care of the guards himself, and Junyo would let him because he was interested in seeing how Hugo would act when he was eventually overwhelmed. Hugo pulled stones from every direction. The prison appeared to come alive to prevent the Faison shots from hitting their true targets. Junyo wanted to gauge Hugo's abilities. Taking it easy on an opponent like Takashi would be a difficult task, and if he deemed Hugo incapable, he would knock him unconscious and take care of the rest on his own. He aimed at the second metal gate from his current position and destroyed it to allow more guards into the corridor to fire their Faison weapons at Hugo's barriers. Hugo rotated the cube he formed around them, patching the bullet holes with his geo-energy. Junyo did not move. Hugo stepped to his side. "What are you doing?" He breathed a bit heavily. "You shot through that second gate, and now there are too many all at once." "Take us through," Junyo said. "Defensive measures are not a catch-all for every situation you encounter." "You sound like him," Hugo said and frowned. "I'll get us through." "Sound like him." Junyo watched as Hugo raised the cube upward like a lift and stopped it, uncovering the top barrier when they reached the steel-laced roof. "All yours," Hugo said. Junyo used his thunder to blow a large hole in the steel. It took a few shots. Hugo placed them on top of the roof, letting the 4 remaining barriers fall onto the roof. Junyo had not expected that course of action. "Sound like who?" Junyo asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Jackson," Hugo said. "When he trained me, he taught that same idea." Junyo doubted Hugo's strength. Hugo had a good head on his shoulders, but would it be enough? He had to make that decision. Akira would have his neck if Hugo died on his watch. The Takashi he had known would not go that far, but this Takashi, the one under Shinjiro's command, this Takashi he did not dare underestimate. Watching after someone else was the reason he preferred working on his own. Less chance of losing his focus. "You see fights as strategic moves," Junyo said. "You only engage in them if you absolutely have to in order to prevent injury to your opponents, but also yourself." He stepped onto the roof and turned toward Hugo. He and Hugo faced each other. Hugo looked like he was considering his words. "Is this true? Are you afraid?" "Hard to explain," Hugo answered. This left Junyo confused. Why would it be hard to explain? He decided he had no time for it. He would shock him unconscious when the time came. He ran across the roof. Hugo followed. Some guards shot through the ceiling, and others climbed their way on top of the roof to apprehend them. He and Hugo reached the edge of the roof under the night sky filled with stars and the moon. He saw the bridge that led to the administration offices, and he saw Takashi waiting and watching from the bridge. He found himself paralyzed. "Looks like I'm up," Hugo said. He chose the right location to have an advantage, but I still have access to the prison, so I'll have a chance. Hugo needed Earth to use his geo-energy unless he was a genetic energist. Takashi had been a step ahead of him, knowing he could not fight him. He was not afraid, not paralyzed by fear, but paralyzed by guilt. His actions allowed Shinjiro to ruin lives. He had to take responsibility for the result of his actions concerning Takashi's life. He would not fight him. "Take us down," Junyo said. Hugo carried them toward the bridge and walled up the corridor's exit. Hugo jumped off on one side, and Takashi watched as he carried Junyo to the other side. Junyo and Takashi's eyes met. Takashi made no move against him. This confused him. Takashi looked conflicted. When he stepped from Hugo's platform, Takashi nodded toward him. Junyo wanted to talk with him, explain himself, and find out what had happened over the years. He wanted to apologize. What he wanted would have to wait. "Junyo!" Hugo called his name, and Junyo glanced past Takashi toward him. "Don't kill him! That's a message from Akira." He paused. "And me." Junyo turned away from Hugo and Takashi. He planned to kill Shinjiro. He already knew what Takashi would want him to do. What Junyo did not want was to look on his face and have him change his mind. He ran toward the door, blasted through it, and continued for Shinjiro's office at the end of the corridor. Alright, that was the first part of part 2. You're going to get to hear the fight that happens between Hugo and Takashi tomorrow. So, thanks for listening. I appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy it. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns about the story, about my voice acting, I would love to hear what you think about the characters so far. But, just write it below in the comment section, and I'll respond in future videos, whatever you say. Right? That was the end of the first part of part 2, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.